She said, "Mom, it's for your own good. You're too old to handle this much money by yourself." My daughter, Karen, said it across the kitchen table like she was reading a weather forecast. Calm, practiced. Her husband, Derek, sat beside her nodding slowly, the way people nod when they've already agreed on the verdict and are just waiting for the sentencing to finish. I looked at my grandson, Ethan, standing in the doorway with his backpack slung over one shoulder. He was 17, old enough to feel uncomfortable, young enough to not know what to do about it. His eyes met mine for half a second before he turned and went upstairs. That look, I'll never forget that look. It wasn't pity. It was warning. I'm 68 years old. I've buried a husband, raised 2 children, taught 4th grade for 31 years, paid off a house, survived a hip replacement, and once drove through a Category 2 hurricane to pick up my mother from a nursing home in Pensacola because the staff evacuated without her. But according to my daughter, I can't be trusted with a checking account. Let me go back a little. My husband, Frank, died 6 years ago. Heart attack on a Sunday morning while watering the tomatoes. I found him in the garden with the hose still running, water pooling around his boots like the ground was trying to hold him there a little longer. The paramedics were kind. The funeral was crowded. People brought casseroles I couldn't eat and sympathy I couldn't use. And then the world got quiet. Frank and I had saved well. Not rich, but careful. A paid-off house in a nice neighborhood outside Nashville. Retirement accounts. A modest investment portfolio Frank had managed himself using a legal pad and a calculator. After he died, I kept things going the same way. Paid the bills on time, kept the accounts balanced, donated to the church and the animal shelter and the literacy program at the library where I volunteered on Tuesdays. Karen lived 20 minutes away with Derek and Ethan. My son, Ryan, lived in Portland. He called once a week, sometimes twice, always brief but warm. Karen was different. She visited often, which I thought was devotion, until I realized it was surveillance. It started small. She'd offer to pick up my groceries. Then she suggested I let Derek handle the lawn service because the yard guys might overcharge you. Then she started asking about my bank statements. Not directly, but in that sideways Karen fashion. "Mom, did you really need a new winter coat? The old one was fine." Or, "I noticed you donated $300 to the shelter again. That seems like a lot for someone on a fixed income." I wasn't on a fixed income. I had more than enough. But Karen had a way of making abundance sound like recklessness. The real shift happened about 18 months ago. Karen came over with a folder. Thick, organized, color-coded tabs. She sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped her with homework for 12 years, and laid it open like a doctor presenting test results. "Mom," she said, "Derek and I have been talking. We think it's time you let us help manage your finances. You're getting older, things slip. We don't want you to make a mistake that costs you everything." I looked at the folder. Inside were printouts of my bank transactions going back 6 months, highlighted entries, notes in Derek's handwriting. They'd been tracking my spending. "How did you get these?" I asked. "You gave me access to your online banking 2 years ago, remember? When you had the hip surgery and needed help paying the hospital bills." I did remember. I'd given her temporary access during recovery. I never revoked it because I trusted her. Because she was my daughter. "I appreciate the concern," I said carefully, "but I'm managing fine." Karen smiled. That smile. Patient, thin, the kind you give a child who insists they can tie their own shoes but keeps tripping. "Mom, you spent $400 at a bookstore last month. I bought books for the literacy program, and $200 at a garden center, rose bushes, for the backyard. And you wrote a check for $1,000 to someone named Dolores Vega. Dolores is my friend. Her car broke down and she needed help." Karen closed the folder and folded her hands. This is exactly what we're worried about. People take advantage of older women living alone. Dolores had been my friend for 40 years. She brought me soup when Frank died and sat with me every evening for 3 weeks straight. She wasn't taking advantage. She was my family, the kind you choose. But Karen wasn't listening. She was presenting a case, and Derek was nodding. That night, I checked my online banking. Karen had changed the password. I called her the next morning. She picked up on the 4th ring. "Oh, Mom, I meant to tell you. Derek set up a new security system on the account. I'll send you the login." She never sent it. Over the next few weeks, things accelerated. Karen added herself as a joint account holder on my savings. She told me she'd streamlined my bills by setting up autopay through her own system. She canceled my credit card and had a new one issued in both our names. Each time, she had a reasonable explanation. I kept teaching myself it was love, that she was trying to protect me, that this is what daughters do. Then the power of attorney arrived. She brought it one Tuesday morning, tucked inside a manila envelope with my name typed on the front. "It's just a precaution," she said, "in case something happens. You sign this, and if you ever can't make decisions, I step in." Simple. I read the document. It wasn't limited to medical emergencies. It gave Karen full control over my finances, my property, my accounts, effective immediately, not upon incapacity. "Immediately. This gives you control right now," I said. "Not later. Now." Karen blinked. "The lawyer said it's standard." "Which lawyer?" "Derek's cousin. He does estate work." I set the paper down. "I'm not signing this." The air in the room changed. Karen's face tightened. Derek stopped nodding. "Mom," Karen said, leaning forward, her voice dropping into that low, controlled register she used when she wanted to sound authoritative. "We've been doing everything we can to keep you safe. We reorganized your bills. We're watching your accounts. We're making sure nobody takes advantage of you. The least you could do is trust us enough to sign a simple document." "It's not simple," I said, "and I didn't ask for any of this." She stood up. "Fine, but when you make a mistake, a big one, don't call me to fix it." She left the envelope on the table. Derek followed her out without a word. From the hallway, I heard Ethan's voice, quiet, almost a whisper. "Mom, maybe you should just let Grandma decide." Karen's response was quick and sharp. "Stay out of it, Ethan." The front door closed. I sat there for a long time, staring at the unsigned document. Then I picked up the phone and called my bank. The branch manager's name was Tom. Young, polite, the kind of man who stands up when a woman walks into the room. I told him I needed to review all recent changes to my accounts. He pulled up the records and went quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, "your daughter has been added as joint holder on your savings and checking. She's also been listed as the primary contact on your investment account, and there's been a redirect on your monthly statements. They're going to a different mailing address." "Her address?" I said. He nodded. "Remove her from everything," I said. "Every account, every contact list, every redirect. Today." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "She'll be notified." "I'm counting on it." I spent the rest of that afternoon in the bank's conference room. Tom brought me coffee and a stack of forms. I changed every password, revoked every access, and reassigned my statements back to my own mailbox. I also asked him about the investment account Frank had set up, the one I'd barely touched since he died. "It's grown quite a bit," Tom said, scrolling through the numbers. "Your husband made solid choices. Conservative, steady. You're sitting on a comfortable amount, Mrs. Calloway." "How comfortable?" he told me. I blinked. "Frank, you stubborn, brilliant man." I walked out of the bank at 4:47 p.m. with full control of every dollar I owned and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The sky was that particular Tennessee gold that happens right before sunset, when everything looks like it's been dipped in honey. I sat in my car for 5 minutes and breathed. My phone buzzed. Karen. I let it ring. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not Derek's cousin. My own. A woman named Patricia Simmons, I'd found through the Tennessee Bar Association. She had a firm voice, gray hair cropped short, and the kind of handshake that told you she didn't waste time. I told her everything. The account changes, the password lockout, the unsigned power of attorney, the spending surveillance. She listened without interrupting, made notes on a yellow legal pad, and when I finished, she looked up and said, "This is financial elder abuse. You know that, right?" I didn't answer right away. The word abuse felt too large, too loud. This was my daughter, my Karen, the girl I taught to ride a bike on Maple Street, who cried the first day of kindergarten, who called me every night her freshman year of college because she was homesick. But Patricia wasn't wrong. And I think part of me had known for a while. I just hadn't been willing to name it. "I don't want to press charges," I said. "I want to protect myself." Patricia nodded. "Then let's start with a new will. A new power of attorney naming someone you actually trust, and a formal letter to your daughter outlining the boundaries. If she crosses them again, we escalate." I agreed. We spent 2 hours drafting the documents. I named Ryan as my power of attorney. I restructured my will. I removed Karen as a beneficiary of the house. Instead, I established a trust for Ethan, accessible when he turned 25, managed by an independent trustee. Patricia would send the formal letter to Karen by certified mail. "She's going to be furious," Patricia said. "She's going to be honest for the first time in years," I said. Fury and honesty often arrive together. Karen didn't call. She showed up. 3 days after the certified letter arrived, she was at my front door at 8 a.m. Derek waited in the car, engine running, like a getaway driver. "What is this?" she said, holding up the letter, her hand trembling. "You hired a lawyer? Against your own daughter?" "I hired a lawyer to protect myself. There's a difference. Protect yourself from what? From the people who've been taking care of you? You changed my passwords, Karen. You redirected my mail. You tried to get me to sign over control of everything I own. Because you're not thinking clearly. You're making bad decisions. You gave $1,000 to some woman. Dolores is my friend. And it was my money. It was reckless. It was generous. There's a difference. But you wouldn't know because generosity requires seeing other people as something more than liabilities." She stared at me. I could see the gears turning, the recalibration. Karen was smart. She knew when brute force failed, pivot to guilt. "After everything I've done for you," she whispered. "The groceries, the yard work, the bills. I never asked for any of that. I was managing my life perfectly well before you decided I was incompetent. You're 68 years old and you live alone, and I intend to keep doing both." Her chin quivered. "Is this about Ryan? Did he put you up to this? Ryan doesn't even know yet. Then what is this about?" I stepped closer. Close enough to see the mascara clumping at the corner of her eye, the small patch of dry skin on her forehead she always forgot to moisturize. "It's about respect, Karen. You stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a project, something to manage, something to control. And the moment I didn't cooperate, you treated me like the enemy. I'm not your enemy. I'm your mother. And I'm asking you, very clearly, to stop." She didn't respond. She just turned around, walked back to the car, and left. The house was quiet after that. Not the sad kind of quiet, the clean kind, like after a storm passes and the air smells like rain and possibility. I called Ryan that evening, told him everything. He listened the way he always did, careful and complete. And when I finished, he said, I'm coming to visit next month. We'll figure out the rest together. There's nothing to figure out, I said. I already figured it. He laughed. Yeah, you did. Ethan came by on a Saturday, alone, on his bicycle. He had flour on his sleeve and a paper bag in his hand. I made muffins, he said. Blueberry. They're kind of ugly, but they taste okay. We sat on the back porch eating ugly blueberry muffins and watching the birds fight over the feeder Frank had built from scrap wood and a coffee can. Mom's really upset, Ethan said after a while. I know. She says you're being manipulated. By whom? He shrugged. She didn't say. I think she just needs someone to blame. I looked at him. 17 years old, already wiser than both his parents combined. Ethan, do you think I'm being manipulated? He took a bite of muffin and chewed slowly. Grandma, you're the most stubborn person I've ever met. Nobody manipulates you. I laughed. Really laughed. The kind that makes your ribs ache and your eyes water. He grinned. And for a moment, the whole mess felt smaller. I set something aside for you, I said. For when you're older, you'll know about it when the time comes. He didn't ask questions, just nodded. Thanks, Grandma. Thank your grandfather. He's the one who saved it. That night, I replanted the rose bushes Karen had called reckless. I dug the holes myself, knees in the dirt, hands black with soil, the evening air thick with honeysuckle from the neighbor's fence. I planted 5, one for each decade of marriage. I watered them slowly, one by one, and stood back to watch the water darken the earth around their roots. Weeks passed. Karen didn't call. I didn't chase her. That was the difference between us. She mistook silence for surrender. I knew it was a boundary. Patricia called with an update. Your daughter's been asking Derek's cousin about contesting the new will. He told her she has no grounds. The accounts are yours, the house is yours, and the trust is ironclad. Good. She also called my office and left a message, said I was enabling elder isolation and she'd report me to the bar. Did she? No. She doesn't have a case, and she knows it. I thanked Patricia and hung up. Then I drove to Dolores's house with a bottle of wine and a container of chicken soup, and we sat on her patio and talked about nothing important for 3 hours. It was the best evening I'd had in months. September came. The rose bushes bloomed late, red and defiant, like they'd been waiting for permission to show up. Ryan visited for a week. He fixed the dripping faucet in the bathroom, painted the porch railing, and took me to dinner at the Italian place Frank and I used to go for anniversaries. He didn't bring up Karen unless I did. When I told him about the trust for Ethan, he was quiet for a moment, then said, Dad would have loved that. The morning Ryan left, I stood in the garden and looked at the house. Really looked at it. The red brick Frank had repointed himself. The shutters I'd painted every 5 years in the same shade of green. The window box I filled with marigolds every spring. This house was mine. Not because of a deed, not because of a bank account, but because I had loved it fiercely, maintained it carefully, and refused to let anyone convince me I didn't deserve to keep it. Karen finally reached out in October. A text message, short and formal. Can we meet for coffee? Just us, I agreed. We met at a diner halfway between our houses. She was already sitting in a booth when I arrived, hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. I'm not here to fight, she said. Good. I'm too old for bad coffee and arguments. She almost smiled. Almost. I've been thinking, she said, about what you said, about seeing you as a project. I waited. I was scared, Mom. After Dad died, you were alone. And I kept thinking, what if something happens? What if someone tricks you? What if you fall and there's no one there? And instead of just asking how you were doing, I started trying to control everything, because that's what I do when I'm scared. I manage. I reached across the table and touched her hand. You didn't ask, Karen. Not once. You didn't ask if I was lonely. You didn't ask if I needed help. You looked at my bank statements instead of looking at me. Her eyes reddened. I know. And the power of attorney. You know what that document would have done. I told myself it was precautionary. You told yourself a lot of things. She pulled her hand back. Not in anger. In shame. Are you ever going to forgive me? I already have, I said. But forgiveness and trust aren't the same thing. One, I can give freely. The other, you have to earn. She nodded slowly, staring at her untouched coffee. The will. Ethan's trust. You're not going to change any of that, are you? No. Even if I... No, Karen. Those decisions are made. They're not punishment. They're protection. There's a difference. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know how to be around you anymore. Start by asking me how I'm doing. And then actually listen to the answer. We didn't hug when we left. We didn't make plans. But she held the door open for me on the way out. And that small gesture, that tiny act of seeing me walk through a doorway and choosing to make it easier, felt like more than any apology could. I drove home with the windows down. Tennessee air warm and sweet, the radio playing something old and familiar that I couldn't name but could hum along to. I pulled into my driveway, under the dogwood tree Frank planted the year Ethan was born, and sat there with the engine off. The house looked the same as it always had. Solid, quiet, full of things that mattered only to me. And that was enough. That evening, I made myself dinner. Nothing fancy. Grilled cheese and tomato soup, the meal Frank called the answer to every bad day. I ate at the kitchen table with the window open, the sound of crickets threading through the screen like background music to a life I was finally living on my own terms. My phone buzzed. Ethan. A photo of a blueberry muffin, slightly less ugly than the last batch. Getting better, the caption read. Then a second message. Love you. Grandma. I typed back. Love you more. Save me one. I set the phone down, finished my soup, and washed the dishes by hand even though the dishwasher worked just fine. Some things are worth doing slowly. Before bed, I walked through the house the way I did every night. Checked the locks, turned off the lights, adjusted the thermostat 2 degrees lower because I sleep better cold. I paused in the hallway by the photo of Frank and me at our wedding, both of us squinting into the sun, both of us so young we didn't know what we didn't know. I handled it, I said to the photo. Took me a while, but I handled it. The house didn't answer. It didn't need to. Some places hold you without saying a word, and some people, eventually, learn to hold themselves. I turned off the hall light and went to bed. The sheets were cool. The room was dark, and somewhere outside, those 5 rose bushes were growing in the quiet, pushing roots deeper into soil that belonged to no one but me. If this story reminded you of someone you love, or someone you've had to love from a distance, leave a comment. Tell me your story. You'd be surprised how many of us are sitting in quiet kitchens, holding boundaries we never thought we'd need. You're not alone, and you're not wrong for choosing yourself.